In a quiet suburban neighborhood nestled between rolling hills and dense woods, Marcus Anderson lived a life of simplicity. He was a tall, muscular black man in his early 40s, with dark eyes that carried the weight of untold stories. To his neighbors, he seemed like an ordinary guy, someone who kept to himself, never causing trouble. Every morning, rain or shine, Marcus would take his loyal German shepherd Max for long walks through the tree-lined streets. Together they formed an inseparable bond, their presence bringing a sense of calm to the otherwise mundane routines of the area. What no one knew about Marcus, however, was that beneath his calm exterior lay a past shrouded in secrecy. Once upon a time, Marcus wasn't just another face in the crowd. He was known as Shadow, one of the Army's most lethal operatives. During his service, he had been deployed to some of the world's most dangerous conflict zones. His missions were classified, whispered about only in hushed tones among those who understood the gravity of his work. Shadow didn't just complete tasks. He dismantled threats with surgical precision, earning both respect and fear from allies and enemies alike. But after years of living on the edge, Marcus decided it was time to leave it all behind. He craved peace, a chance to live without the constant shadow of danger looming over him. Retiring quietly, Marcus moved to this small town where people barely noticed each other beyond polite nods and occasional greetings. It was exactly what he wanted. Anonymity. Here, he could focus on rebuilding his life, reconnecting with humanity outside the chaos of war. Max, rescued from a shelter shortly after Marcus settled into his new home, became his closest companion. The dog seemed to sense Marcus's need for stability and companionship. With Max by his side, Marcus found solace in the rhythm of everyday life. Morning walks, reading books in the park, and tending to his modest garden. But even in this peaceful setting, Marcus couldn't completely escape the remnants of his old life. Sometimes late at night, memories of battles fought and lives lost would creep into his mind, haunting him like ghosts. On such nights, he'd sit silently on his porch, staring at the stars while Max rested his head on Marcus's knee. These moments reminded him why he chose this path, to distance himself from violence and hatred. Yet deep down, Marcus knew that the skills he acquired during his military career weren't something you could simply forget. They were ingrained in him, part of who he was now. The townsfolk admired Marcus from afar, though few truly understood him. Some thought he was reserved because he preferred solitude. Others assumed he was simply shy. Whatever the reason, they respected his privacy. Children loved Max, often stopping to pet the friendly dog during their evening strolls. Neighbors occasionally exchanged pleasantries with Marcus, commenting on how well-behaved Max was or complimenting his gardening skills. Despite the warmth around him, Marcus maintained a subtle distance, careful not to let anyone get too close. He didn't want to risk revealing parts of himself that might attract unwanted attention. Little did Marcus know, his quiet existence was about to be disrupted. One crisp autumn afternoon, as golden leaves swirled in the breeze, Marcus and Max set out on their usual route. The air smelled faintly of pine and damp earth, a comforting scent that matched the serenity of the moment. As they walked, Marcus felt at ease, almost forgetting the turbulent life he once led. But fate has a way of testing even the strongest resolve. Unbeknownst to him, trouble was brewing nearby, lurking in the shadows of the very streets he called home. That day, a group of men loitered near the park, their leather jackets adorned with patches and tattoos marking them as members of a notorious local gang. Known for targeting minorities and spreading fear throughout the community, they thrived on intimidation and violence. Their leader, a burly man named Ray, spotted Marcus and Max approaching from a distance. A cruel grin spread across his face as he nudged his companions. "Look at this," Ray said mockingly. "A big guy walking his little puppy. Think he's tough?" The others laughed, egging him on. What they didn't realize was that they were about to cross paths with someone far more dangerous than they could imagine. As Marcus rounded the corner, unaware of the impending confrontation, the gang stepped forward, blocking his path. Ray sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "What are you doing here? This isn't your neighborhood." Marcus stopped, his grip tightening slightly on Max's leash. Though his expression remained calm, his instincts began to stir. Years of training told him to assess the situation carefully, but he hoped to resolve it peacefully. "I'm just taking my dog for a walk," Marcus replied evenly, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. Ray snorted, clearly unimpressed. "Well, maybe we don't want you here." The gang closed in, forming a tight circle around Marcus and Max. Taunts filled the air, growing louder and more aggressive. One of them kicked dirt toward Max, causing the dog to growl protectively. Marcus raised a hand slightly, signaling Max to stay calm. Inside, however, his pulse quickened. He recognized the signs of escalating hostility and braced himself mentally. Still, he tried reasoning with them, hoping to avoid conflict. "Let us pass," Marcus said firmly, his deep voice cutting through the noise. But instead of backing down, the gang laughed, mistaking his composure for weakness. Little did they know, they were about to awaken something far more formidable than they had bargained for. For now, Marcus stood his ground, determined to protect himself and Max. Though he longed for peace, he understood that sometimes standing up against hatred required action. And if push came to shove, Marcus was ready. After all, the shadow within him had never truly disappeared. It had merely been waiting patiently for the right moment to emerge. The tension in the air was palpable as Marcus stood surrounded by the gang, their sneers and taunts echoing off the nearby buildings. Ray, the leader, took a step closer, his bulky frame towering over Marcus. "You think you're tough?" Ray spat, his voice laced with venom. "This is our turf and we don't want your kind here." His words carried not just anger but a deep-seated hatred that went beyond reason. The rest of the gang egged him on, their jeers growing louder, feeding off each other's aggression. One of them kicked more dirt toward Max, who barked sharply, his hackles rising. Marcus tightened his grip on the leash, keeping Max under control while silently calculating every movement around him. Marcus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he scanned the group, analyzing their positions and gauging their intentions. Years of combat training had taught him to stay calm under pressure, to let his opponents make the first mistake. He knew better than to engage emotionally. Anger clouded judgment, and Marcus needed clarity now more than ever. Still, he tried one last time to defuse the situation. "I'm not looking for trouble," he said evenly, his tone firm but devoid of hostility. "Just let us go, and no one gets hurt." But the gang wasn't interested in backing down. To them, Marcus's calm demeanor was an insult, a sign of weakness. Ray smirked, clearly amused by the idea that this quiet man could pose any real threat. "No one gets hurt?" Ray mocked, taking another step forward. "That's cute. You think you can talk your way out of this?" Behind him, the others laughed, emboldened by their numbers. They circled tighter, closing the gap between themselves and Marcus, their confidence swelling with every passing second. Max growled again, low and menacing, his body tense beside Marcus. The dog sensed the danger long before it escalated. He'd been trained to protect, and right now his instincts screamed at him to act. But Marcus gave a subtle shake of his head, signaling Max to hold his position. For now, Marcus wanted to avoid involving the dog, unless absolutely necessary. Protecting Max was as important to him as defending himself. Yet even without Max's intervention, Marcus knew he couldn't back down. If he showed fear or hesitation, the gang would see it as permission to escalate further, and Marcus refused to give them that satisfaction. Ray suddenly lunged forward, swinging a meaty fist aimed at Marcus's face. It was a reckless move, fueled by arrogance rather than strategy. But Marcus had seen attacks like this countless times before. Without flinching, he shifted his weight slightly, ducking beneath the punch with fluid precision. Before Ray could recover, Marcus grabbed his wrist, twisting it sharply until the larger man yelped in pain and dropped to one knee. The sudden display of skill stunned the gang momentarily, their laughter dying on their lips. "What the hell?" one of them muttered, staring wide-eyed at Marcus. But shock quickly turned to rage. Another member of the gang charged, throwing wild punches in an attempt to overwhelm Marcus. This time, however, Marcus didn't wait for them to land a blow. He sidestepped effortlessly, using the attacker's momentum against him. With a swift kick to the man's knee, Marcus sent him sprawling onto the pavement, clutching his leg, in agony. The sound of bones cracking echoed through the street, silencing the remaining gang members for a brief moment. Despite the chaos unfolding around him, Marcus remained eerily composed. Each movement was deliberate, efficient, and calculated. There was no wasted energy, no unnecessary force, just pure precision. To anyone watching, it almost seemed like a choreographed dance, the way Marcus moved between his attackers, neutralizing threats with surgical accuracy. Max stayed close, his sharp barks punctuating the scene, adding to the intensity of the moment. Though the dog refrained from attacking, his presence alone was enough to unnerve the gang further. One by one, the gang members fell, their bravado crumbling under the weight of Marcus's expertise. Some tried to regroup, attempting clumsy combinations of punches and kicks, but none could match his speed or agility. Every attempt to land a hit ended in failure, leaving them bruised and humiliated on the ground. Even Ray, who had started the confrontation so boldly, hesitated now, his earlier confidence shattered. He watched as Marcus dismantled his crew, with ease, his mind struggling to reconcile the image of this quiet man with the lethal fighter standing before him. As the final attacker collapsed, groaning in pain, an eerie silence settled over the street. The only sounds were the distant rustle of leaves in the wind and Max's steady breathing. Marcus stood tall, his chest rising and falling steadily as he surveyed the scene. Not a single drop of sweat marred his brow, nor did his expression betray any hint of exertion. To him, this wasn't a victory. It was survival. He hadn't sought this fight, but when forced into it, he responded with the same discipline and focus that had defined his career as Shadow. The gang members lay, scattered around him, some clutching injuries, others too stunned to move. Ray, still on his knees, stared up at Marcus with a mixture of disbelief and fear. Who are you?" he stammered, his voice trembling. For the first time since the confrontation began, Marcus spoke. "Someone who doesn't tolerate hate," he replied, his tone cold yet controlled. The words carried a weight that silenced Ray completely, leaving him speechless. Neighboring houses that had been quiet moments ago now buzzed with activity. Windows creaked open, and curious faces peered out, drawn by the commotion. Some residents cautiously stepped outside, unsure of what they would find. When they saw Marcus standing amidst the fallen gang members, their expressions shifted from concern to awe. A few clapped quietly, grateful for the courage he had shown. Others whispered among themselves, marveling at how this seemingly ordinary man had single-handedly taken down a group of dangerous thugs. For Marcus, though, the attention was unwelcome. He didn't seek recognition or praise. All he wanted was to continue living his peaceful life. With a gentle tug on Max's leash, he signaled the dog to follow him as he walked away from the scene. The gang members didn't dare stop him, too humiliated and injured to pursue. As Marcus disappeared down the street, the neighborhood erupted into murmurs of admiration and relief. The shadow of fear that the gang had cast over the area was gone, for good. Unbeknownst to everyone, including the gang, Marcus's actions that day marked a turning point not just for the community, but also for himself. Though he had hoped to leave violence behind forever, he realized that sometimes standing up against hatred required stepping back into the role he thought he'd left behind. And while Marcus never sought to be a hero, his quiet strength inspired those around him, proving that true bravery wasn't about seeking glory. It was about doing what was right, even when it came at great personal cost. The aftermath of the confrontation left the neighborhood in a state of stunned silence. Neighbors who had initially peeked out of their windows cautiously began to emerge, drawn by both curiosity and relief. Some clapped quietly, their applause carrying gratitude for Marcus's unexpected heroics. Others whispered among themselves, piecing together what they had just witnessed. "Did you see that?" one woman asked her husband, her voice tinged with awe. He took them all down like it was nothing. The man nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on the spot where the gang had fallen. "Who is that guy?" Marcus paid little attention to the murmurs as he continued walking with Max, his pace steady and unhurried. To him, this was just another day, a momentary disruption in an otherwise peaceful routine. Yet he couldn't ignore the shift in the air. The gang's presence had cast a shadow over the community for months, spreading fear and division. Now, with their leader humiliated and their members incapacitated, that shadow was lifted. Children who had once been afraid to play outside now peeked out from behind curtains, their faces lighting up with cautious hope. Elderly residents exchanged relieved smiles, no longer worried about being harassed during their evening strolls. As Marcus rounded the corner onto his street, he felt a familiar weight settle back onto his shoulders. It wasn't guilt or regret. It was something deeper, a reminder of the life he had tried so hard to leave behind. For years, Marcus had believed that retiring from the military meant escaping violence altogether. He had convinced himself that he could bury the skills and instincts that made him shadow, focusing instead on building a quiet, uneventful existence. But today proved otherwise. No matter how far he ran from his past, certain truths remained, unchanged. Danger had a way of finding him, and when it did, he couldn't stand idly by. Max seemed to sense his master's introspection. The dog trotted alongside Marcus, occasionally brushing against his leg as if to offer comfort. Marcus reached down absently, scratching behind Max's ears. "Good boy," he murmured softly, his voice barely audible above the rustling leaves. Though Max hadn't physically fought, his presence had been a source of strength throughout the ordeal. Together, they formed a partnership built on trust and mutual protection, a bond that went beyond words. Back at home, Marcus closed the door behind him, leaning against it for a moment as he exhaled deeply. The house was quiet, its familiar warmth wrapping around him like a blanket. He glanced at Max, who padded over to his favorite spot near the fireplace and flopped down with a contented sigh. Marcus allowed himself a small smile before heading to the kitchen to pour himself a glass of water. As he sipped, his mind replayed the events of the afternoon, not because he wanted to relive them, but because he needed to process them. What struck Marcus most wasn't the fight itself. It was the reaction it elicited from the people around him. In the army, his actions had often gone unnoticed or unappreciated, shrouded in secrecy due to the classified nature of his missions. Here, however, there was no anonymity. Strangers thanked him openly, their expressions filled with admiration and gratitude. Children waved excitedly as he passed, calling out greetings to both him and Max. Even neighbors who had previously kept their distance now approached him with warm smiles, eager to express their appreciation. At first, Marcus found the attention overwhelming. He wasn't used to being acknowledged, let alone celebrated. For someone who valued privacy, the sudden spotlight felt intrusive. Yet as days turned into weeks, he began to notice subtle changes in the community. People started looking out for one another more, fostering a sense of unity that hadn't existed before. Parents felt safe letting their kids play outside again. Elderly residents resumed their morning walks without fear of harassment. The streets, once tense and unwelcoming, now buzzed with laughter and conversation. Still, Marcus remained wary. He knew better than to believe that one incident could erase years of prejudice and hostility. While the gang had retreated, licking their wounds and nursing their pride, their absence didn't guarantee lasting peace. Hatred, Marcus understood, was resilient. It thrived in the cracks of society, waiting for opportunities to resurface. And though he had dismantled this particular threat, others might rise in its place. That thought weighed heavily on him, a reminder that vigilance was key, even in a place as seemingly tranquil as this. Despite his reservations, Marcus couldn't deny the impact his actions had on those around him. Slowly but surely, he became a symbol of courage and resilience within the neighborhood. People looked to him not just as a protector, but as an example of how to stand up against injustice. His humility only added to their admiration. When asked about the fight, Marcus shrugged it off, attributing his success to luck or circumstance. "I was just in the right place at the right time," he would say, deflecting praise with a modest smile. But those who truly knew him saw through the facade. They recognized the quiet strength beneath his calm exterior, the same strength that had earned him the nickname Shadow. Over time, Marcus adapted to his new role in the community, albeit reluctantly. He attended neighborhood meetings, offering advice on safety measures and self-defense techniques. He helped organize patrols, ensuring that residents felt secure in their homes. And whenever someone expressed fear or uncertainty, he listened patiently, sharing stories of perseverance without ever revealing too much about his own past. Through these small gestures, Marcus found a renewed sense of purpose. Though he had sought anonymity, he realized that sometimes stepping into the light was necessary to inspire change. Max, of course, remained his constant companion. Wherever Marcus went, the loyal German shepherd followed, earning affection from everyone they met. Children begged to pet him during walks, while adults marveled at his obedience and intelligence. "He's like a superhero sidekick," one boy joked, tugging gently on Max's fur. Marcus chuckled, patting the dog's head. "Something like that," he replied, his tone light but meaningful. As autumn gave way to winter, the neighborhood transformed under a blanket of snow. Lights twinkled in windows and the scent of pine filled the air. For the first time in years, Marcus felt a genuine connection to the world around him. He wasn't just surviving, he was thriving, finding joy in the simple pleasures of life. Whether it was watching Max chase snowflakes in the yard or exchanging holiday greetings with neighbors, Marcus embraced each moment with gratitude. Yet even amidst the cheer, Marcus remained vigilant. He knew that peace was fragile, requiring effort and commitment to maintain. And though he hoped never to face another confrontation like the one with the gang, he understood that danger was always lurking, ready to test the resolve of those who dared to stand against it. If called upon again, Marcus would answer, not because he sought glory, but because it was the right thing to do. After all, true heroes weren't defined by their desire for recognition, but by their willingness to protect others, even at great personal cost. And so Marcus and Max continued their journey together, two souls bound by loyalty and purpose. They walked the same streets they always had, but now they did so with a renewed sense of belonging. The shadow of Marcus's past may have lingered, but it no longer controlled him. Instead, it served as a reminder of the strength within him, a strength that, when channeled for good, could inspire others to rise above hatred and fear. As winter deepened, the neighborhood settled into a rhythm of quiet normalcy. Snow blanketed the streets, muffling sounds and creating an almost magical stillness. Children built snowmen in their front yards, their laughter echoing through the crisp air. Neighbors exchanged warm greetings as they shoveled driveways, bundling up against the biting cold. For Marcus Anderson, this newfound sense of peace was both comforting and surreal. After years of living on edge, first in the military, and then as a recluse, it felt strange to experience such calm. Yet he welcomed it, cherishing every moment of tranquility with Max by his side. Despite the serenity, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that storms often followed periods of calm. It wasn't paranoia, it was experience. His years in the army had taught him that danger rarely announced itself beforehand. More often than not, it crept in silently, catching its victims off guard. So while others basked in the holiday cheer, Marcus remained watchful. He continued his daily walks with Max, scanning the surroundings for anything unusual. The gang hadn't returned since their humiliating defeat, but Marcus knew better than to assume they were gone for good. Pride and revenge were powerful motivators. One chilly afternoon, as Marcus and Max strolled past the park where the confrontation had taken place, something caught Marcus's eye. A group of teenagers lingered near the playground, huddled together and whispering animatedly. At first glance, they seemed harmless, young kids trying to stay warm, but something about their body language set off alarm bells in Marcus's mind. Their furtive glances and restless movements suggested they were up to no good. Marcus slowed his pace, observing them from a distance without drawing attention to himself. Max growled softly, his ears perked forward. "Easy, boy," Marcus murmured, placing a reassuring hand on the dog's head. Though Marcus didn't want to jump to conclusions, he couldn't ignore his instincts. He decided to take a detour, looping around the park instead of cutting through it. As he did, he noticed one of the teenagers pulling out a phone and speaking hurriedly into it. Whatever they were planning, it wasn't innocent. Later that evening, as Marcus sat by the fireplace reading a book, there was a knock at his door. Startled, he set the book aside and approached cautiously. Through the peephole, he saw Mrs. Harper, an elderly neighbor who lived 2 houses down. She looked anxious, clutching her coat tightly around her. Marcus opened the door, concern etched on his face. "Mrs. Harper, is everything okay?" She hesitated for a moment before blurting out, "I think someone's been watching my house." Her voice trembled slightly. "I've noticed strange cars driving by late at night, and earlier today I saw some young men hanging around the corner. They didn't look right." Marcus nodded, his jaw tightening. "Thank you for letting me know," he said calmly. "I'll keep an eye out." Mrs. Harper gave him a grateful smile before hurrying back to her home. Once inside, Marcus stood by the window staring out into the darkness. Something was brewing, and he needed to be prepared. Over the next few days, Marcus stepped up his vigilance. He encouraged neighbors to report any suspicious activity and reminded them to lock their doors at night. During his walks with Max, he took note of unfamiliar faces and vehicles. Sure enough, patterns began to emerge. The same group of teenagers Marcus had spotted near the park kept reappearing in different parts of the neighborhood. They weren't confrontational, at least not yet, but their presence was deliberate, almost as if they were mapping out the area. Then came the graffiti. One morning, Marcus discovered hateful messages scrawled across several walls and fences. Racial slurs and threats marred the once pristine surfaces, sending a clear message. The gang wasn't done. They were testing the waters, probing for weaknesses. Marcus clenched his fist as he read the words, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. This wasn't just vandalism. It was intimidation, a tactic designed to instill fear. The community rallied quickly. Residents organized cleanup efforts, scrubbing away the offensive marks with determination. When asked about the incident, Marcus spoke firmly but reassuringly. "They're trying to scare us," he told the gathered crowd, "but we can't let them win. We stick together, support each other, and show them that hate has no place here." His words resonated deeply, bolstering the resolve of those around him. That night, as Marcus lay awake listening to the wind howl outside, he reflected on the situation. The gang's tactics had shifted. They were smarter now, working indirectly, through proxies rather than confronting him directly. It made sense after their last defeat they wouldn't risk another head-on clash. Instead, they aimed to wear the neighborhood down, chipping away at its spirit until people became too afraid to resist. But Marcus refused to let that happen. If the gang wanted a fight, they would get one, but on his terms. The following week, Marcus implemented subtle changes to strengthen the community's defenses. He suggested installing additional streetlights in dimly lit areas and encouraged residents to form informal neighborhood watches. He also reached out to local authorities, providing detailed observations about the suspicious activities. Though the police couldn't act without concrete evidence, they promised to increase patrols in the area. Meanwhile, Marcus spent hours training with Max, honing the dog's protective instincts. Together, they practiced scenarios designed to prepare them for potential threats. Max responded eagerly, his loyalty unwavering. To anyone else, these exercises might have seemed excessive, but Marcus knew better. Preparation was key. When trouble arrived, and it inevitably would, he intended to be ready. One evening, as Marcus and Max returned from their walk, they encountered a lone figure lurking near Mrs. Harper's mailbox. The man froze when he saw them, clearly startled. Before Marcus could react, Max growled menacingly, his hackles rising. The intruder stumbled backward, muttering apologies before sprinting away into the shadows. Marcus watched him go, his expression grim. This was only the beginning. Word spread quickly about the attempted break-in, further uniting the neighborhood. People praised Marcus for his quick thinking and thanked Max for his role in thwarting the threat. Yet Marcus remained humble, deflecting compliments with a simple nod. "We're all in this together," he reminded them. "Stay alert, and don't hesitate to call for help if you need it." As December drew to a close, the tension in the air grew thicker. The gang's proxies became bolder, lingering longer and venturing closer to homes. Marcus knew it was only a matter of time before they escalated their efforts. Still, he refused to give in to fear. Every day, he walked the streets with Max, projecting confidence and strength. His mere presence served as a deterrent, reminding everyone, including the gang, that this community was protected. Through it all, Marcus found solace in the bonds he had formed with his neighbors. What had started as polite nods and casual greetings had blossomed into genuine friendships. People trusted him, relied on him, and looked to him for guidance. In turn, Marcus drew inspiration from their resilience. Together, they proved that unity could overcome hatred, that courage could silence fear. Yet even as he embraced this role, Marcus never forgot who he truly was. Beneath the calm exterior of a retired soldier-turned-community guardian lay Shadow, the lethal operative trained to dismantle threats with precision and efficiency. That part of him remained dormant for now, waiting patiently in the wings. But should the gang push too far, Marcus knew he wouldn't hesitate to unleash it. For the sake of his neighbors, his dog, and the life he had fought so hard to build, he would do whatever it took to protect what mattered most. And so Marcus and Max continued their quiet crusade, standing as steadfast guardians against the tide of hatred threatening to engulf their peaceful corner of the world. While others celebrated the holidays with feasts and gifts, Marcus found joy in simpler things: the sound of children laughing, the warmth of shared smiles, and the knowledge that he was making a difference. Peace, he realized, wasn't just the absence of conflict. It was the presence of hope, trust, and love. And as long as he had Max by his side, Marcus knew he could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The new year arrived with a biting frost that clung to the ground, turning the world into a shimmering expanse of white. The neighborhood, though quieter than usual due to the holidays, buzzed with cautious optimism. Marcus and Max continued their routine walks, their presence a reassuring constant for the residents. Yet beneath the surface of this fragile peace, tension simmered like an ember waiting to ignite. The gang's proxies had grown bolder, testing boundaries and pushing limits. Their graffiti appeared more frequently, their shadowy figures loitered, closer to homes, and whispers of threats reached Marcus through concerned neighbors. One evening, as Marcus prepared dinner in his cozy kitchen, he heard a soft knock at the door. He opened it to find Sarah, a young mother who lived across the street, clutching her coat tightly around her. Her face was pale and her eyes darted nervously. "Marcus," she began, her voice trembling, "I think someone tried to break into my house tonight." She explained how she'd been putting her son to bed when she noticed the back door rattling. By the time she got downstairs, whoever it was had fled, leaving behind muddy footprints on the porch. Marcus listened intently, his expression calm but his mind racing. "Did you call the police?" he asked gently. Sarah nodded. "They came, but they said there wasn't much they could do without evidence." Frustration laced her words. Marcus placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry," he assured her. "We'll figure this out together." After Sarah left, Marcus stood by the window staring out at the darkened street. The gang was escalating their tactics, moving from intimidation to direct attempts at breaking into homes. It was a dangerous game, one that risked spiraling out of control. Marcus knew he couldn't rely solely on the authorities. Action needed to be taken immediately. That night, he sat down with a map of the neighborhood, marking areas where suspicious activity had been reported. Patterns emerged. Certain streets were targeted repeatedly, while others remained untouched. It became clear that the gang was focusing on weaker points, homes occupied by elderly residents or single parents who might not fight back. The next morning, Marcus called a meeting with a few trusted neighbors. They gathered in his living room, sipping coffee as they discussed strategies to strengthen their defenses. Marcus proposed installing motion-activated lights and cameras around vulnerable properties. He also suggested organizing overnight patrols, rotating shifts among volunteers to ensure no section of the neighborhood went unwatched. "We need to show them we're ready," Marcus said firmly. "If they realize we're prepared, they'll back off." The group agreed, inspired by Marcus's leadership. Over the following days, the community worked tirelessly to fortify their homes and streets. Neighbors helped each other install security systems, sharing tools and expertise. Children pitched in too, creating signs that read, "This neighborhood is protected," and hanging them proudly in windows. Even Max played a role, accompanying Marcus during patrols and serving as both a deterrent and a source of comfort for anxious residents. Despite these efforts, the gang didn't relent. One frigid night, as Marcus patrolled with Max, they stumbled upon a group of teenagers attempting to vandalize a neighbor's car. The teens froze when they saw Marcus approaching, their spray cans dangling limply in their hands. Without hesitation, Max lunged forward, barking fiercely. The intruders dropped their cans and scattered, disappearing into the shadows. Marcus sighed deeply, shaking his head. These kids weren't the real threat. They were pawns in a larger game. But their actions underscored the growing desperation of the gang, which meant things were about to get worse. A week later, the gang made their boldest move yet. Late one night, as snow fell softly outside, Marcus heard the unmistakable sound of shattering glass. Grabbing his flashlight and leash, he rushed outside with Max close behind. Across the street, two masked men were attempting to break into Mr. Patel's convenience store. The elderly shopkeeper, alerted by the noise, stood trembling in the doorway, clutching a baseball bat. Marcus didn't hesitate. With Max at his side, he moved swiftly, positioning himself between the intruders and Mr. Patel. "Stop right there," Marcus commanded, his voice cutting through the cold air like steel. The men froze, startled by his sudden appearance. One of them brandished a crowbar, sneering. "Stay out of this, old man," he growled. But Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he signaled Max to stay alert while he advanced slowly, his posture radiating authority. The standoff lasted mere seconds. When one of the men lunged toward Marcus, he sidestepped effortlessly, grabbing the attacker's arm and twisting it until the crowbar clattered to the ground. The second man hesitated, unsure whether to flee or fight. Before he could decide, Max let out a thunderous bark, startling him enough to retreat. Within moments, both intruders were running into the night, leaving behind only footprints in the snow. Mr. Patel lowered his bat, relief washing over his face. "Thank you, Marcus," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my store, and maybe my life." Marcus simply nodded, brushing off the gratitude. "Let's make sure this doesn't happen again," he replied, already formulating a plan to secure the store further. News of the thwarted burglary spread quickly, reinforcing Marcus's reputation as the neighborhood's guardian. People began referring to him as the Protector, a title he neither sought nor embraced. Yet even as admiration for him grew, Marcus remained focused on the bigger picture. He knew the gang wouldn't stop, not unless they were confronted directly. And so, he devised a risky plan to draw them out. Marcus started leaving subtle clues, making it appear as though the neighborhood's defenses were weakening. He reduced the frequency of patrols and encouraged neighbors to dim their outdoor lights, temporarily. At the same time, he positioned himself strategically, staying hidden but always within reach. It was a gamble, one that required precision and patience. But Marcus was willing to take the risk if it meant ending the gang's reign of terror once and for all. His plan worked sooner than expected. On a bitterly cold night, Marcus received an anonymous tip from a teenager who had overheard the gang planning a major attack. According to the informant, the gang intended to target multiple homes simultaneously, hoping to overwhelm the community. Armed with this information, Marcus coordinated with trusted neighbors, setting up traps and ambush points throughout the neighborhood. Hidden cameras captured every movement, ensuring nothing would go unnoticed. When the gang finally struck, they walked straight into Marcus's carefully laid web. Volunteers stationed at key locations used alarms and whistles to signal their positions, creating chaos among the attackers. Marcus, with Max leading the charge, intercepted the gang leader himself. This time, there was no room for mercy. Using every ounce of skill and strength he possessed, Marcus disarmed and subdued Ray, pinning him to the ground until the police arrived. As dawn broke over the horizon, the neighborhood breathed a collective sigh of relief. The gang was finally defeated, its members arrested and charged with numerous crimes. Residents celebrated quietly, grateful for the peace that Marcus had fought so hard to restore. Though some urged him to step into the spotlight, to share his story and inspire others, Marcus declined. To him, this wasn't about recognition. It was about protecting those he cared about and proving that unity could overcome hatred. In the weeks that followed, life returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be after such turmoil. Marcus resumed his daily walks with Max, greeted warmly by neighbors who now regarded him as family. Children ran up to pet Max, laughing as the dog playfully licked their faces. Elderly residents invited Marcus for tea, eager to thank him personally for everything he had done. Through it all, Marcus remained humble, deflecting praise with a quiet smile. Yet deep down, Marcus knew that his journey wasn't over. While so, the gang had been neutralized. The scars they left behind would take time to heal. Prejudice and fear still lingered in pockets of society, waiting for opportunities to resurface. But Marcus refused to dwell on what might come next. Instead, he focused on the present, the laughter of children, the camaraderie of neighbors, and the unwavering loyalty of Max. Together, they had weathered the storm and emerged stronger than ever. For Marcus, the true reward wasn't fame or accolades. It was the knowledge that he had made a difference. In standing up against hatred, he had shown the power of courage, resilience, and unity. And as long as he had Max by his side, Marcus knew he could face whatever challenges lay ahead. After all, heroes aren't defined by their desire for glory. They're defined by their willingness to protect others, even when the odds are stacked against them. The weeks after the gang's arrest brought a profound sense of renewal to the neighborhood. The once tense streets now brimmed with laughter and life, as if a heavy cloud had finally lifted. Marcus and Max resumed their morning walks, greeted by smiles from neighbors who no longer looked over their shoulders in fear. Children played freely in parks, their shouts echoing through the crisp air. Elderly residents strolled confidently, enjoying the newfound safety. Even the local businesses thrived, with customers returning to shops they had avoided during the gang's reign of terror. For Marcus, this transformation was both rewarding and humbling. He hadn't sought recognition for his actions, yet people continued to express their gratitude in countless ways. Some left homemade pies on his doorstep. Others wrote heartfelt notes thanking him for his bravery. One day, a group of kids presented him with a handmade poster that read, "Hero of our neighborhood," in bold letters, complete with drawings of Max barking fiercely at stick-figure criminals. Marcus chuckled softly, touched by their gesture, but remained steadfast in deflecting praise. "It wasn't just me," he reminded them gently. "We all stood together." Despite his humility, Marcus couldn't deny the impact his presence had made. Strangers who had once kept their distance now approached him openly, eager to share stories or simply chat. Parents entrusted him with advice about teaching their children self-defense, while teenagers sought guidance on how to handle peer pressure. To everyone, Marcus became more than just a neighbor. He was a mentor, a protector, and a symbol of hope. His quiet strength inspired those around him to believe in themselves and their ability to overcome adversity. Max, too, basked in the admiration showered upon him. The loyal German Shepherd quickly became a beloved figure in the community, earning treats and belly rubs wherever he went. Kids adored him, often trailing behind Marcus and Max during their walks, giggling as they tried to mimic the dog's confident stride. "He's like your superhero partner," one boy exclaimed, tugging playfully at Max's leash. Marcus smiled, nodding in agreement. "Something like that," he replied, his tone light but meaningful. As spring approached, melting away the remnants of winter, the neighborhood organized a small celebration to honor Marcus and Max's contributions. Held in the park where the initial confrontation had taken place, the event drew nearly everyone from the area. Tables were set up with food and drinks, balloons swayed lazily in the breeze, and music played softly in the background. A banner hung across the entrance reading, "Thank you, Marcus and Max," here, in bright, cheerful letters. When Marcus arrived with Max, the crowd erupted into applause. For someone who valued privacy, the attention was overwhelming, but not unwelcome. Neighbors lined up to shake his hand, hug him, or simply say thank you. Mrs. Harper teared up as she hugged Marcus tightly. "You've given us our lives back," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Marcus patted her shoulder awkwardly, unsure how to respond. "We did it together," he said finally, glancing around at the smiling faces surrounding him. The highlight of the celebration came when Mr. Patel stepped forward, holding a framed photograph. It showed Marcus standing protectively in front of the convenience store on the night of the attempted burglary, Max poised beside him like a guardian angel. "This is for you," Mr. Patel said, handing the frame to Marcus. A reminder of what true courage looks like. Marcus accepted it quietly, his expression unreadable, but as he gazed at the photo later that evening, he felt a rare moment of pride, not for himself but for the community that had come together to stand against hatred. Though the festivities marked a turning point, Marcus knew better than to let his guard down completely. Danger, he understood, was cyclical. Just because one threat had been neutralized didn't mean another wouldn't arise. Yet instead of dwelling on potential risks, Marcus chose to focus on building resilience within the community. He encouraged neighbors to continue practicing vigilance, reminding them that unity was their greatest weapon against fear. Together, they formed a network of support, ensuring that no one felt isolated or vulnerable. In the months that followed, Marcus found joy in the simple pleasures of life. Spring brought budding flowers and warmer days, perfect for long walks with Max. They explored trails beyond the neighborhood, discovering hidden corners of nature that offered peace and solitude. At home, Marcus spent hours gardening, nurturing plants that grew steadily under his care. Each bloom seemed like a testament to renewal, a reflection of the growth he saw in himself and those around him. Max remained his constant companion, always ready for adventure or comfort. Whether it was curling up by the fireplace on chilly evenings or bounding through fields during their outings, the bond between man and dog only deepened with time. To Marcus, Max represented more than loyalty. He embodied the spirit of protection, a reminder that love and trust could conquer even the darkest moments. Yet despite the happiness he found, Marcus occasionally reflected on his past. The memories of battles fought and lives lost still lingered, haunting him in quiet moments. But rather than letting them weigh him down, he channeled them into purpose. Through his actions, he had proven that the skills he once used for destruction could be repurposed for good. He wasn't Shadow anymore, at least not entirely. He was Marcus Anderson, a man who chose to rise above hatred and dedicate himself to protecting others. One sunny afternoon, as Marcus and Max strolled through the park, they passed a group of children playing soccer. One of the boys ran up to Marcus, breathless and grinning. "Can I pet your dog?" he asked eagerly. Marcus nodded, watching as the boy knelt to scratch Max's ears. "Your dog's so cool," the child said, looking up at Marcus with wide eyes. "Is he brave like you?" Marcus paused, considering the question. Then, with a small smile, he replied, "Bravery isn't about being fearless. It's about doing the right thing even when you're scared." The boy tilted his head thoughtfully before running back to join his friends, calling out, "I'm gonna be brave like Marcus and Max." Watching the scene unfold, Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest. He realized that his legacy wasn't defined by the fights he'd won or the enemies he'd defeated. It was measured by the lives he'd touched and the values he'd instilled in others. By standing up against hatred, he had shown that courage wasn't reserved for soldiers or heroes. It lived within anyone willing to act with kindness and conviction. As the seasons changed and years passed, Marcus and Max continued their journey, together. The neighborhood evolved, welcoming new families and adapting to modern challenges. Yet the foundation of unity and resilience Marcus had helped build endured. Stories of his heroism were passed down, inspiring future generations to stand firm in the face of injustice. And though Marcus never sought fame, his quiet strength left an indelible mark on the community. In the end, Marcus understood that true peace wasn't the absence of conflict, it was the presence of hope, trust, and love. With Max by his side, he had created a sanctuary not just for himself, but for everyone fortunate enough to call the neighborhood home. Their story served as a reminder that even in the darkest times, light could prevail, if only people dared to embrace it. And so Marcus and Max walked on, two souls bound by loyalty and purpose. They may have started as strangers seeking solace, but together, they became pillars of strength, proving that true heroes aren't born, they're made, one courageous act at a time.